That day started with the promise of open road and brotherhood, a perfect ride for charity. It ended with a badge, a lie, and the roar of 200 veteran engines demanding justice. The air was perfect. You know the kind I'm talking about. That sweet spot in late spring where the sun is warm on your leather jacket, but the breeze still has a cool bite to it. It's the kind of day that makes the rumble of a V-twin engine feel like the heartbeat of the world. My bike, a gleaming black Harley I call Shadow, was humming beneath me, a deep, contented purr. After 2 tours overseas, a day like this, with nothing but open road and the brotherhood of my club, was my own slice of heaven. We were meeting at our usual spot, a little diner on the edge of town called the Greasy Spoon. The owner, a sweet old lady named Marge, loved us. We were the Iron Legacy VMC, Veterans Motorcycle Club. We weren't outlaws, we were ex-Marines, airmen, soldiers, and sailors who traded off fatigues for riding vests. Our weekly ride wasn't about causing trouble, it was therapy. Today was special though. We were kicking off a charity ride for the local kids shelter, and spirits were high. I pulled Shadow into the lot, lining her up perfectly next to about 20 other bikes, all polished to a mirror shine. The spot was technically part of a wide, unused curb area, a gray zone we've been using for years without a single issue. It kept the main parking spots free for cars. I killed the engine, and the satisfying silence that followed was immediately filled with laughter and greetings from my brothers. "Looking good, Deacon." Marcus, our club president, clapped me on the shoulder. They call me Deacon because I'm usually the calm one, the guy who de-escalates things. Shadow's shining brighter than my future. I chuckled, pulling off my helmet. Just gave her a wash press, you know how it is. We were just heading inside for coffee when a police cruiser rolled into the lot, slowly, predatorily. The mood shifted instantly. The laughter died down. We weren't doing anything wrong, but when you a group of bikers, and most of you are black like me and Marcus, you learn that you don't have to be doing anything wrong to have your day ruined. 2 officers got out. One was older, looked like he'd seen it all and was tired of most of it. The other was young, with a fresh buzz cut and a chin that jutted out like he was spoiling for a fight. He was the one who spoke first, his eyes scanning our bikes with a look of pure contempt. "Whose bikes are these?" he asked, his voice unnecessarily loud. I stepped forward, keeping my hands visible and my tone level. "They're ours, officer. Is there a problem?" The young cop, whose name tag read Davis, pointed a thumb over his shoulder. "You're parked illegally. This is a fire lane." I glanced back at the curb. There were no markings, no red paint, no signs. "Sir, with all due respect, there's no signage indicating this is a fire lane. We park here every weekend to leave the main lot open for Marge's customers." The older officer, Miller, sighed. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. But Davis, he seemed to be enjoying this. "Ignorance of the law is not an excuse," he said, puffing out his chest. "I want all of these vehicles moved now. And I'm going to need to see license and registration from every single one of you." A low murmur went through our guys. This was harassment, plain and simple. We knew it, they knew it. But I held up a hand, signaling for calm. "All right, brothers, let's cooperate. No sense in making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. I was Deacon after all. My job was to keep the peace." I walked back to Shadow, pulled my registration from the saddlebag, and handed it to Davis, along with my license. He snatched them from my hand and began scrutinizing them. "Michael Rain," he read aloud, then looked up at me. "You a veteran?" he asked, noticing the designation on my license. "Yes, sir, Air Force," I said, hoping that might build a bridge of professional respect. It didn't. He sneered. "Doesn't give you a pass to break the law." He then started walking around my bike, running a gloved hand over the engine. "What's this? Aftermarket pipes? These aren't street legal." Now my blood started to simmer. "Officer, those pipes are fully compliant with state noise and emissions regulations. I have the certification right here." "I don't care about your certification," Davis spat back. "They're not stock. That's a violation. On top of the illegal parking, that's enough for me." He turned to his partner. "Miller, call a tow." My heart dropped into my boots. "You're gonna tow my bike for a parking dispute and pipes that are perfectly legal?" My voice for the first time had an edge to it. Shadow wasn't just a machine. It was my freedom, my therapy, the one thing that felt truly mine after years of being government property. "That's exactly what I'm gonna do," Davis said with a smug grin. "Consider a lesson in respecting the law." Marcus stepped up beside me, his presence a solid wall of muscle and quiet fury. "Officer, this is unnecessary. We're moving the bikes. There's no need to tow this man's property." Davis put a hand on his service weapon, a gesture that was both subtle and a direct threat. "You need to step back, sir. This is official police business." The tow truck arrived with a speed that felt pre-planned. As the tow truck started hooking up my bike, a sense of violation washed over me. It was a slow, agonizing process. The chains rattled, the winch groaned, and I watched as Shadow was hoisted onto the flatbed like a carcass. My brother stood silently behind me, a thundercloud of helpless rage gathering over the parking lot. They were looking to me, to their deacon, to see what to do. As the tow truck driver secured the last strap, Officer Davis walked over to me, handing me a slip of paper. "You can pick it up on Monday, assuming it's not part of an investigation. Have fun with the impound fees." His smile was pure poison. He had won. He had taken a perfect day, a day for charity and brotherhood, and had twisted it into a display of his own petty power. I watched the truck pull out of the lot, my bike, my shadow, shrinking in the distance. I felt the eyes of all my brothers on me. The calm, the control, it was all gone, burned away by the injustice. The veteran in me who respected authority was being suffocated by the man who'd had enough. I turned away from the disappearing truck and faced Marcus. My entire body felt cold, but my mind was suddenly crystal clear. I pulled out my phone, my movements slow and deliberate. Marcus watched me, his expression grim. He knew that look in my eyes. It was the same look I had in Kandahar right before everything went sideways. It wasn't the look of Deacon, the peacemaker. It was the look of a man who had just been pushed past his limit. My thumb hovered over the club's emergency alert, the one that sent a text blast to every member of Iron Legacy and our allied clubs in a 100-mile radius. I looked at Prez, my voice low, dangerously quiet. "He wanted to teach me a lesson," I said, locking eyes with him. "Well, school's in session." I pressed the button. Then I turned my gaze down the street, in the direction of the town's small police precinct where my bike was being taken. A faint smile touched my lips, but there was no warmth in it. "Prez," I said, my voice a low growl that carried across the silent lot. "Tell everyone to cancel their plans for the charity ride. We're going on a different ride today." A slow, collective intake of breath seemed to hang in the air. Then, a single nod from Marcus. That was all it took. The switch was flipped. There was no more discussion, no more debate. An order had been given, a call to arms answered. Around me, my brothers moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency that spoke of years in disciplined units. Jackets were zipped, helmets were donned, and the silence of the lot was shattered by the simultaneous roar of 24 engines firing to life. The sound wasn't angry, not yet. It was something deeper, more resolute. It was the sound of purpose. My phone, still in my hand, began to buzz uncontrollably. It was the confirmations, texts from our own chapter members who were at home or work, on my way. Then came the replies from allied clubs, the Devil's Brigade, the Sons of Valor, the Riders of Odin, all veterans clubs, all men who understood what it meant to have a line crossed. The messages were short, coded in our own language. Echo confirmed. Tango en route. Solid copy, Prez. We're rolling. Within minutes, the horizon began to hum. It started as a faint vibration you could feel in your teeth, the kind that signals a distant earthquake. Then the hum grew into a rumble, a bass note that shook the windows of the greasy spoon. Marge came to the doorway, her face pale, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else. Understanding. First, 2 bikes appeared, then 4, then a whole column cresting the hill. They poured into the surrounding streets, a river of chrome and steel. They weren't joyriding. They moved in staggered formations, a rolling parade of controlled power. The sheer number of them was breathtaking. 50 bikes became 100, then more. They came from all directions, a swarm of disciplined hornets converging on our location. Men I hadn't seen in months, men I only knew by their road names and the patches on their backs, were here. They didn't ask questions. The alert meant a brother was in trouble. That was all they needed to know. Marcus swung his leg over his bike and looked at me, his eyes dark. 200, at least, he said, his voice a low growl barely audible over the idling engines. You lead, Deacon. This is your ride. I nodded, my throat tight. I put on my own helmet, the world narrowing to the view through my visor. I swung onto Marcus's spare bike, a big, heavy road glide that felt foreign beneath me. It wasn't Shadow, but it would do. I took my place at the head of the column, Marcus right beside me. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could feel the weight of 200 engines, 200 brothers, ready to follow me to the gates of hell if I asked. We rolled out. Not fast, not loud. We moved through the town's main street at a slow, deliberate pace. People came out of shops, their phones held up, their mouths agape. We weren't revving our engines or shouting. We didn't have to. The silence of the riders, combined with the thunder of our procession, was more intimidating than any overt threat. We were a force of nature, a storm that had been summoned. The precinct was a small, unassuming brick building on a corner lot. It was designed to handle traffic tickets and the occasional Saturday night drunk, not this. We didn't just pull up, we enveloped it. Like a python calling around its prey, our column wrapped around the entire block. I gave a single hand signal, and in perfect unison, 200 V-twin engines were cut. The sudden, shocking silence was deafening. It pressed in on the small building, a physical weight. I swung off the bike and took off my helmet. Marcus and the presidents of the 2 largest visiting clubs flanked me. We walked up the short concrete steps and through the glass doors. The air inside was stale, smelling of old coffee and disinfectant. A young officer at the front desk looked up from his computer, his eyes widening in panic as we filled the doorway. Can I help you?" he stammered. "I'm here to see Officer Davis," I said, my voice eerily calm. "And I'm here for my motorcycle." Before the desk sergeant could respond, a door opened and Davis himself stepped out, a smug look plastered on his face. He'd clearly been watching us from a window. "Well, well," he said, hooking his thumbs in his duty belt. "Look what we have here. You brought your little friends, Rain, trying to intimidate an officer of the law?" "No," I said, taking a step forward. "I'm here to retrieve my property, which you seized under false pretenses." "False pretenses?" he laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Your bike had illegal modifications and was parked in a fire lane. It's in the impound lot. Evidence. You're not getting it back today." "I have the certifications for the pipes," I stated flatly. "And you and I both know that wasn't a fire lane. You did this because you could, because you saw a group of bikers and decided to ruin their day." His smile faltered. My directness had hit a nerve. "You have a problem, you take it up with the judge." Just then, an older man in a chief's uniform hurried out from a back office, his face flushed. "What in God's name is going on out there?" he demanded, looking from me to Davis, then craning his neck to see the sea of bikers outside.
"Chief," Davis started, "this is the guy I was telling you about. He's brought a gang here to threaten us." I ignored Davis and addressed the chief directly. "Sir, my name is Michael Rain. I am a veteran of the United States Air Force. My club, the Iron Legacy VMC, and our friends, who are all veterans as well, were preparing for a charity ride when your officer unlawfully towed my motorcycle. He targeted me, he lied about the violations, and he abused his authority. We are not here for a fight. We are here to correct a wrong. I want my bike, and I want an apology." The chief looked at me, then at the silent, menacing crowd outside. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was trapped. If he gave in, he looked weak. If he escalated, he could have a riot on his hands. He straightened his tie, trying to project an authority he clearly didn't feel. "Mr. Rain," he said, his voice tight, "I understand you're upset, but we have procedures. That motorcycle was impounded as evidence of multiple violations. It is now part of an active criminal investigation." He took a deep breath, and his next words dropped like a block of ice into my stomach. "Not only are you not getting your bike back, but I consider this assembly an act of mass intimidation. You have exactly 5 minutes to disperse your men. If you are not gone by then, I will authorize the arrest of every single rider out there for conspiracy and intimidation of a police officer." A cold fury, sharper and more dangerous than anything I'd felt in the diner parking lot, settled deep in my bones. An active criminal investigation? Conspiracy? He wasn't just doubling down on Davis's lie. He was building a fortress of them. The chief wasn't looking for a resolution. He was looking for a war. He was trying to stare me down, to make me blink. He didn't know who he was dealing with. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, letting his threat echo off the linoleum floors. I could feel Marcus tense beside me, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I held up a hand, just a fraction of an inch, and he subsided. My gaze never left the chief's. "Sir," I said, my voice dropping to a low, almost conversational tone, "let me be perfectly clear. We are not a gang. We are United States military veterans. The man standing next to me did 3 tours in Fallujah. The man behind him has a Purple Heart from a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. Out in that street, there are men who have fought for this country in every major conflict since Vietnam. We are not criminals. We are men who have sworn an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And right now, from where I'm standing, your officers' actions feel pretty damn domestic." The chief's face went from flushed to pale. He'd expected yelling, threats. He wasn't prepared for this. Officer Davis, however, saw it as a sign of weakness. "Don't listen to him, Chief," Davis piped up, his bravado returning. "He's just trying to talk his way out of it. They're a menace. Look at him." I slowly turned my head and fixed my eyes on Davis. For the first time, I let the raw, unfiltered anger I was feeling show. "You want to talk about menace, son?" I asked, my voice like gravel. "A menace is a man with a badge and a gun who uses his power to harass citizens because he doesn't like the way they look. A menace is a man who lies on an official report to justify his own prejudice. You targeted us, you abused your authority, and now you're trying to hide behind your chief." I turned back to the chief. "You have your procedures, and we have ours. You gave us 5 minutes. That's generous. We only need 2. I turned my back on them and walked out the precinct doors, my brothers following close behind. The sunlight felt good on my face. 200 pairs of eyes were on me, waiting. I walked to the center of the street, right in front of the main entrance, and stood there, my hands on my hips. I looked at the sea of leather and chrome, at the faces of men who had trusted me enough to follow me here. Brothers, my voice boomed in the quiet street. The chief has informed me that my bike is now evidence in a criminal investigation. He has also informed us that if we are not gone in 5 minutes, we will all be arrested for intimidation. A wave of angry shouts and curses erupted from the crowd, a beast stirring from its slumber. I let it go on for a moment. Then I raised my hand. Silence fell instantly. "We are not intimidating anyone," I continued, my voice ringing with conviction. "We are exercising our First Amendment right to peaceable assembly. We are here to protest the unjust actions of an officer of this department. We will not be moved. We will not be threatened. We will stand here, peacefully and silently, until they return what they have stolen."
I pulled out my phone again. This time, I didn't open the Club Alert app. I opened Facebook. I started a live stream. "This is Michael Deacon Rain of the Iron Legacy Veterans Motorcycle Club," I said, pointing the camera at my own face, then panning slowly across the incredible sight of the bikers surrounding the precinct. "We are here in peaceful protest. An hour ago, one of our own, a decorated veteran, had his motorcycle illegally towed and impounded by Officer Davis of this department based on fabricated violations. When we came to seek justice, we were threatened with mass arrest by the chief of police. The view count on the live stream started to climb. 10 viewers became 50, then 500, then thousands. The comments started rolling in, a torrent of support. My brothers were all sharing it. Their families were sharing it. Veterans groups across the country were picking it up. I saw the chief and Davis watching from the precinct window, their faces grim. The phone buzzed in my hand. It was a local news reporter. I ignored it. Then another call, this time from a TV station in the state capitol. The story was exploding. The chief's 5-minute deadline came and went. No one moved. The police didn't have the manpower to arrest 200 men. And now, with thousands of people watching online, they knew it would be a public relations nightmare. We just stood there, silent, a living, breathing blockade of leather-clad patience. The sun beat down on us. An hour passed, then another. We didn't flinch. Marge from the diner showed up with a pickup truck full of water bottles, which were passed silently through the ranks. Just after the 2-hour mark, a side door to the precinct opened. A different officer, one I hadn't seen before, walked out cautiously. He was older, with sergeant stripes on his sleeves. He looked exhausted. He walked straight up to me, ignoring everyone else. "Mr. Rain?" he asked, his voice respectful. "That's me," I said. "I'm Sergeant Peterson. The chief asked me to come talk to you. Look, this has gotten out of hand." "It was out of hand the moment your officer put my bike on a tow truck," I replied. He nodded, conceding the point. "There's been a reevaluation of the situation. Officer Davis's report was found to have certain inconsistencies. The chief has authorized the release of your motorcycle. All fees will be waived." A wave of triumphant murmurs went through the crowd. Victory. But I wasn't smiling. "And Officer Davis?" I asked. The sergeant sighed. "He's been placed on administrative leave, pending a full internal investigation. It wasn't justice, not really, but it was a start." "All right, Sergeant," I said. "You bring my bike out here right now, and we'll be on our way." He nodded and disappeared back inside. A few minutes later, the big bay door at a police garage rolled up, and there she was, my shadow. But my relief was instantly replaced by a white-hot, blinding rage. They hadn't just towed it, they had torn it apart. The saddlebags were ripped open, their contents strewn on the ground. The custom leather seat was slashed. And worst of all, spray-painted across my fuel tank, the tank I had spent weeks airbrushing with the Air Force emblem in memory of my fallen wingman, were the words "Thug Life" in sloppy, dripping red letters. The world went red. The triumphant hum that had been building within our ranks died instantly, replaced by a collective, guttural growl of pure fury. That wasn't just vandalism. It was a desecration. It was a message.
They hadn't just impounded my bike, they had violated it deliberately and maliciously. The spray paint wasn't just paint, it was a final, cowardly act of disrespect from someone who had lost the battle and decided to burn the village on their way out. And I knew, with a certainty that settled in my soul like a block of ice, who had done it. I turned and walked back towards the precinct, my steps heavy and deliberate. The crowd parted before me like the Red Sea. Marcus was right at my shoulder, his hand resting on my back, a silent offer of support, or maybe restraint. I didn't know which. I didn't care. Sergeant Peterson was standing in the garage doorway, his face a mask of horror. He had clearly just seen the damage for the first time. "Rain, I swear I didn't know," he stammered, holding his hands up. "This wasn't supposed to happen. This is not how we do things." "Where is he?" My voice was unnaturally calm, devoid of all emotion. It was a voice my men in the service had learned to fear more than my yelling. "Who?" Peterson asked, though he knew the answer. "Davis," I said, my eyes locking onto his. Before the sergeant could answer, the chief appeared behind him, his face ashen. He had seen the bike. He knew what this meant. This was no longer about a bogus traffic stop. This was a hate crime, and it had happened in his precinct, on his watch. "Mr. Rain," the chief began, his voice shaky. "This is an outrage, a criminal act. We will find whoever did this, and they will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "I appreciate that, Chief," I said, still with that dead flat calm. "But I think we both know who did this. Your officer lost face, so he decided to get his revenge. He defaced my property with a slur. He vandalized a memorial to a fallen soldier. I pointed to the Air Force emblem, now barely visible beneath the ugly red letters. That man was my friend. He died in my arms in a dust-off chopper outside Bagram. That bike is all I have left of him." A wave of shock and revulsion rippled through the crowd. My brothers hadn't known the full story of the emblem. Now they did, and the temperature in the street dropped another 20 degrees. I took a step closer to the chief, into his personal space. "So you can conduct your internal investigation. You can place him on administrative leave. But right here, right now, I want him. I'm not going to hurt him. I'm a disciplined man. But he is going to come out here, in front of my brothers, in front of the world." I gestured to my phone, still live streaming, now with a viewer count in the tens of thousands. "And he is going to apologize. And then he's going to clean my bike."
The chief stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. He was a man drowning, out of his depth and out of options. The law was no longer on his side. Public opinion was a tidal wave about to crash down on his department. He looked past me, at the 200 silent, grim-faced veterans who looked more like an occupying army than a protest, and he broke. He turned and barked an order into the precinct. A few moments later, 2 officers emerged, half dragging a pale, trembling Officer Davis between them. They had taken his gun belt. He looked small and pathetic without his uniform of authority. He refused to meet my eyes, staring at the ground. "Tell him," the chief commanded, his voice filled with disgust. Davis mumbled something incoherent. "Louder!" Marcus roared from behind me, and Davis flinched as if he'd been struck. I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Sorry for what?" I pressed, relentless. "I want to hear you say it." He finally looked up, his eyes swimming with a pathetic mix of fear and resentment. I'm sorry I towed your bike. I'm sorry I painted it." "Good," I said. I turned to Sergeant Peterson. "Sergeant, I'm going to need a bucket, soap, water, and every bottle of paint thinner you can find in this building." For the next hour, the world watched a disgraced police officer on his hands and knees scrubbing red paint off the fuel tank of a Harley-Davidson. My brothers and I stood in a semicircle, watching him in utter silence. He worked clumsily at first, his hands shaking, but under the weight of 200 pairs of unblinking eyes, he found a rhythm.
The ugly red letters began to fade, slowly revealing the proud emblem underneath. When he was finished, the paint was gone, though the clear coat was ruined. The bike was clean but scarred, just like my faith in the local law enforcement. Davis stood up, his uniform stained, his knuckles raw. He looked like a broken man. "Get him out of my sight," I said to the chief, my voice filled with dismissal. The officers led Davis away, back into the shadows of the precinct. I walked over to my bike, running a hand gently over the damaged tank. It would need to be repainted, but it was whole. It was mine. I turned to my brothers, the men who had answered the call without hesitation. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all." A cheer went up, a thunderous roar of victory and brotherhood that echoed through the town. The tension was finally broken. Men were clapping each other on the back, smiling for the first time in hours. The chief approached me one last time. "Mr. Rain," he said, extending a hand, "on behalf of the department, I want to offer my sincerest apologies. What happened here today was a failure of our standards. It won't happen again." I looked at his hand, but didn't take it. "Chief," I said, "words are easy. Actions are what matter. You have a chance to fix the culture in your department. Don't waste it." I turned my back on him, swung my leg over Shadow, and felt the familiar comfort of the worn leather. The engine roared to life with a single touch, a defiant growl that was music to my ears. I took my place at the head of the column, and with a single hand signal, we rolled out, 200 strong. We didn't leave the way we came. We took a victory lap, a slow, proud procession right down Main Street, the setting sun glinting off our chrome. We hadn't come looking for a fight, but we had finished one. We had stood our ground, held the line, and shown a whole town and a corner of the internet what happens when you push good men too far. The charity ride was postponed, but that day we had ridden for a different kind of charity, the charity of justice. And as we rode off into the sunset, the rumble of our engines wasn't just noise, it was the sound of respect, earned and reclaimed.